Good morning, everyone. We hope that you are enjoying your time with us, and a very warm welcome to any newcomers. Welcome to the second day of the JPO International Music Festival Music Unboxing Series. Joining us is Dr. David Chin, who is a renowned conductor. Please refer to the festival website for more details. We hope that you find this experience to be an interesting time.
Johann Sebastian Bach has established himself as the cornerstone of Western music. He has produced more than 1,000 works during his lifetime, synthesizing the essence of all music genres before and during his time, while having the capability of inexhaustible invention, producing compositions which set unmovable benchmarks for all who come after him. All being said, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as Bach belongs to a family consists of generations of musicians throughout central Germany, including Bach's birthplace, Eisenach. Eisenach is a town located in central Germany. In addition to the Bach family, the town has seen many notable historical figures since the Middle Ages. Saint Elizabeth of Hungary spent most of her life living at the court here during the 13th century. Martin Luther hid himself at the Wartburg Castle for almost a year shortly after the beginning of the Reformation. Composer Georg Philipp Telemann produced a great deal of music while he was serving here as the court musician. And Franz Liszt conducted his oratorio, The Legend of St. Elizabeth, at the Wartburg Castle's ceremonial hall in 1867. Johann Sebastian Bach's father, Johann Ambrosius Bach, was also an accomplished musician. He was hired as the director of town musicians here in Eisenach. Therefore, he and his wife Maria Elisabeth Lamhert moved from Erfurt to Eisenach in 1671. More than a decade later, Bach was born into an environment surrounded with music. Today, I am meeting with Dr. Jörg Hansen, the director of the famous Bach House in Eisenach. Bach House Eisenach was once thought to be the house in which Johann Sebastian Bach was born and raised, but recent discoveries have suggested just the opposite. So this was not the actual birthplace of Bach.
Bach biographers thought that it was this house, but later a hobby researcher looked into old tax records, and he found out that Johann Ambrosius Bach, the father of Johann Sebastian, had paid taxes for the house over there.
So just...
And yeah, the dark grey one down the street. Yes. This is already the third building at the same place. So this is not actually the house that Bach would have seen.
If Bach didn't live here, so who were living here in this very house when Bach was born?
At the time of his birth, it was owned by the school director, Georg Börstelmann. The house opposite the Bauhaus garden, this is actually the place where Johann Sebastian Bach's father, Johann Ambrosius, first lived when he moved here with his first wife, Elisabeth Lemmerhirt, and their just 3 months old young son, Johann Christoph Bach. They lived for rent for 3 years, from 1671 to 1674. We can see that Bach wasn't the best in his class. Actually, the first class of the Latin school that he visited, he was just the 47th in class. He also missed a lot of days, and we must think that he was a sickly child. Because school was very strict, you couldn't just stay away and help your parents or have a fun day. You had to go to school unless you were sick. He jumped one class to enter the second class of the Latin school. That might have been not a good idea because he wasn't very good in the second class.
But we know that Bach was not always in school a very super bright student. He was just quite ordinary.
Well, he improved. I think he was 12th in class in his last class, so he wasn't a bad student, but he wasn't best in class. We also have a timetable. School started at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it started with catechism lessons. So Luther's catechism, the 6-piece catechism, each of the 6 pieces was taught at the beginning of each school day. So starting with law, with faith and prayer, and then baptism, confession, and the Holy Communion on Saturday. So each day would start with these lessons, and also the Luther songs that Luther had written to go with his catechism, they were sung in each morning. Actually, the school day was very musical.
So Bach grew up with the music of Martin Luther.
Yes.
And that's why in his cantatas we see that many chorale tunes were Luther's chorales.
There are detailed records of which songs were sung in school. You wouldn't be surprised that the same songs that each school day started were the songs that Bach used in 1737 for his Klavierübung Part 3, where he used catechism pieces by Martin Luther. It was the same songs that he had sung in school when he was here in Eisenach with 7, 8, 9 years old.
The young Bach grew up not only singing songs written by Luther, but like Luther himself, Bach was a choir boy at the St. George's Church, where his uncle, Johann Christoph Bach, was serving as the organist at the same time. On March 21st, 1685, Bach was born here in Eisenach. A few days after his birth, his parents took him here to the Georgenkirche, which is the St. George Church, to receive baptism. Bach grew up here in this church listening to the music, and all this music has a strong impact for the rest of his musical life.
Ich denke, irgendwo hier in der Nähe wird er auch gesessen und gestanden haben. Er ist in Eisenach geboren, er ist in Eisenach zur Schule gegangen und war in dieser Zeit im Chorus Musicus. Und dieser Chor hat hier in der Georgenkirche in den Gottesdiensten liturgische Aufgaben gehabt. Und Bach hat also als Kind hier gesungen, das weiß man. Sein Onkel, der Johann Christoph, war zu dieser Zeit Organist. Man kann annehmen, dass Johann Sebastian seinem Onkel sicherlich auf die Finger geschaut hat und bei ihm vielleicht auch was mitbekommen hat und gelernt hat. Johann Sebastian Bach ist im Alter von 2 Tagen am 23. März 1685 hier in dieser Kirche getauft. An diesem Taufstein. Er stand damals an einer anderen Stelle. Heute steht er hier genau in der Mitte. Er ist original erhalten und wird auch heute noch zur Taufe benutzt.
Things changed very quickly when Bach lost his 2 siblings during early childhood, followed by the death of both his parents by the time he was 10 years old. He was left with another brother, Johann Jakob Bach. Both of them were soon adopted by their eldest brother, whose name also Johann Christoph, the organist at St. Michael's Church in Ohrdruf. Under his brother's supervision, Bach was exposed to music written by some of the greatest composers of the day, which gave ways to his enrollment later at the prestigious St. Michael's School in Lüneburg, as well as his first official job in Arnstadt. Arnstadt is one of the oldest towns in the state of Thuringia in Germany. Many original sites of Bach's family have survived, including the famous Bach Church, where the young Johann Sebastian Bach held his first professional position as an organist soon after he graduated from the prestigious St. Michael's in Lüneburg. So here we are right in front of the Bach Church in Arnstadt, and I believe that this is the church where Bach had his very first professional position, isn't it?
Yes, he was only 18 years old when he came to Arnstadt in 1703. He was organist at this church for 4 years, and he came to a city where his father grew up and with a big tradition of the Bach family making music. At the very first, it was the Bonifatius Kirche, and it was burned down in big fire, city fire, in the late 16th century, and it was rebuilt in the, I think, 1680s, and got a new organ, which was inaugurated by Bach in 1703, and the city was so fascinated by his organ playing that he appointed him as organist, a very, very young Bach, only 18 years old.
Hello, Jörg.
Hallo.
What did you just play?
Ich habe gespielt O Jesu, wie ist dein Gestalt aus den Neumeisterchorälen.
So that would have been written when Bach was here in Arnstadt.
Ja, das ist ein Stück, welches hier in Arnstadt entstanden ist, und es zeigt, wie man schon gehört hat, den sehr einfühlsamen, empfindsamen jungen Bach.
The young J.S. Bach was strongly influenced by the German organist Georg Böhm. In fact, many recent researchers point to the fact that Bach had studied with Böhm during his time in Lüneburg between 1700 and 1702.
In jedem Fall so, dass an diesem Stück, gerade an diesem Pedalsolo, da könnte man ein Stück von Georg Böhm nehmen. Ein Präludium in E-C-Dur, der Anfang ist so ähnlich.
The Bach family enjoys a long legacy of music making in Arnstadt and throughout the state of Thuringia. Long before Johann Sebastian's time in Arnstadt, many of his ancestors have lived and worked here as organists, composers, court musicians, and town pipers. So behind here, I see a tower, and that would have been the tower that the Stadtpfeifer, which were the city musicians, they would have played the music on top of the tower right there.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the tower itself belonged to the castle, which was demolished in the 18th century, but only the tower survived. On top of the tower, there's a small apartment where the town piper lived.
So they live on the tower?
Yes, true. So he was also the watchman and had to watch at the city if there's a fire or something else, if there are enemies approaching.
So they would play some sort of alarm for the city
Absolutely,
if anything
yes.
happened. So
Yes.
they were kind of a guard,
Yes,
a security
and the music
guard.
was also had also the function of a signal. The first Bach in Arnstadt, Caspar Bach,
Yeah.
in the 1620s, he was here as a town piper and working up there.
And we also know that Johann Sebastian Bach's father, Johann Ambrosius Bach, he was also a Stadtpfeifer.
Yes, he was. He grew up here in Arnstadt, later had his job in Eisenach. Well, they didn't live at the tower, but yes, he had the very same job. We are now walking the way Bach took with his cousin in an August night in 1705 when he came from the house of the town organist Christoph Hartum and walked home in between the church and the town hall. He met the student from the Latin school, Gaius Bach, who approached both and hit Bach's face because Bach insulted him and humiliated him in public and called him Zippelfagottist, which means a greenhorn bassoonist. They had a real argue and then a fight, so Gaius Bach slapped Bach's face. Bach took his sword and wanted
A sword?
a real sword. And well, his cousin went in between and said, "Oh, Sebastian, stop this, let's go home, it's late at night and don't do stupid things." And so everything ended quite smoothly.
So he ended up didn't act on it, but he was about
Yes.
to use his sword. And this tells us that Bach was full of rage, the young Bach, full
Yes,
of
he was.
emotions, like we hear in his music.
Yes, absolutely.
This was a really young Bach and just like slouching, you know.
Yeah, well, he's 18, 19, 20 years old. Look at his clothes, very
Casual,
very casual,
unbuttoned.
modern, yes.
So I'm seeing that he's looking at somewhere.
Well, I heard the idea is that he is looking to Lübeck, where he went 300 kilometers foot walk to hear the music of Buxtehude. Buxtehude was his big role model. He took vacation for 4 weeks, but didn't return until 4 months. So we don't really know if he only went to Lübeck to hear Buxtehude playing the organ and to study with him. There were a young generation of musicians traveling to Lübeck around that time, also George Frederick Handel or the young Johann Mattheson, because Buxtehude is quite old and they are looking for a successor. But that changed very quickly when they found out that you have to marry Buxtehude's daughter to get the job. And she was, well, at this time already 30 years old, so 10 years older than Bach and Handel. And so all these young men lost interest in the job very quickly.
After his return from Lübeck, Bach was summoned by the Arnstadt consistory at the end of February 1706 because he had been away for too long. Additionally, he was also being accused not only for ignoring the high school student ensembles who could never meet his expectation, but also playing complicated music in worship services and even inviting a woman to sing in church. This led Bach to a new position at Mühlhausen in 1707, where he worked for a year and married his first wife, Maria Barbara, until he received an offer to become court organist for the Duke in Weimar, a post which came with a salary far above his in Mühlhausen and was considered one of the most prestigious positions in all of Thuringia. I am meeting with Dr. Michael Maul, one of the most prominent Bach scholars of our time.
The Weimar period for Bach was very important in his life. When he arrived in Weimar in 1708, he was just 23 years old. And in Weimar, he suddenly had access to music from entire Europe, because the court was very well connected, 2 places in Italy, 2 places in France, and they had a music collection covering almost everything which was composed in entire Europe in early 18th century. And that was a much better situation than he had before in Mühlhausen or in Arnstadt. Started in March 1714. He was promoted concertmaster with the obligation to provide on a monthly basis sacred cantatas for the service. And that was the moment when Bach started composing on a regular basis church cantatas. And all these pieces he created in 1714, 15, I mean, they were already masterworks. Look, pieces like Ich hatte viel Bekümmernis,
Right.
or Weinen, Klagen, Sorgen, Zagen, Himmelskönig sei willkommen. They are among our favorite Bach cantatas.
Right. In August of 1717, Bach signed the contract to become the music director at the court of Leopold, Prince of Anhalt-Köthen. But his employer, William Ernest of Saxe-Weimar, not only rejected his resignations, but imprisoned Bach for almost a month for obstinate behavior and forcing the question of his dismissal. Bach was eventually released in December of the same year and took his new position in Köthen. Many of Bach's instrumental works were composed during his time in Köthen, such as the Brandenburg concertos, sonatas, partitas, first part of the Well-Tempered Clavier, as well as all the violin concertos and other works.
Bach were conducting the Brandenburg concertos for the first time, for example. I mean, the room looked different. You see here a classical room 100 years later than Bach. So you have to imagine the room much more lower. The ceiling were at the end of these columns. It was silk green tapestry on the side, a lot of paintings. We know from over 40 paintings. There were some musical instruments, some harpsichords were inside the room. And also a big wooden bed used for the levee ceremony was installed here. So we have to imagine Leopold wakened up at the morning in a ritual, maybe accompanied by music played by Bach and his musicians. We don't know that. We only know it from the register that there was actually a bed inside. And usually 2 times a month there were big concerts inside the room. And it's a very, very beautiful imagination for us that Bach was standing here at this very spot playing his music.
It is not by accident that Bach later mentioned that was the best time of my life, because I had a prince who actually not only loved music, but also he knew a lot about music. So in other words, this was a prince who really realized what amazing quality Bach was able to provide in his compositions. The prince even paid 3 people only to carry Bach's own harpsichord from here to Karlsbad, which was a 4-day trip with horses. So in other words, he wanted to make sure that his Kapellmeister, Bach, was able to perform in Karlsbad for all the other authorities and princes and dukes and so on his own instruments.
Most of the pupils of Bach were trained on an instrument like this. Yeah. And also there is this tale that he used an instrument like this to punish the sons. So they had to play next to the sleeping room until Bach was sleeping.
That's Bach's favorite prince.
He's not 30 on this painting. So you can tell by the painting he must have been very ill. his whole life and had some troubles.
One moving story, it was in 1718 that a child of Bach was born and was baptized here in this chapel, and his name was Leopold August Bach. And the two names, Leopold and August, they came from the two godfathers. The one was the prince himself, Leopold, and August, the other godfather, was the brother of Leopold. So they both served as godfathers, but actually it didn't help because this child died weeks after he was baptized. So, which was an ordinary thing in Bach's family. You know, Bach all in all had 20 children, and 10 of them died in childhood. In fact, most of them in their first year of life.
In the summer of 1720, when Bach traveled with Prince Leopold to Karlsbad, his wife Maria Barbara died suddenly and unexpectedly. When Bach returned from the trip 2 months later, he was shocked to learn that Maria had died and long been buried. A year later, soprano Anna Magdalena was hired as the court singer and married to Bach a few months later. Bach met Anna Magdalena, the court singer, here, and they got married really quickly. And
Yeah.
might this be the very place that he might have met Anna?
Yeah, maybe not the court chapel, but somewhere here on the castle, something happened very quickly. What we know is that she turned up at the court in summer 1721. So that was the time when the prince hired her. She was a very young lady, 19 years old. And she obviously was very quickly in a close relationship with Bach, because we know that already in December, which was 4 months later, they both married.
Bach departed Köthen for Leipzig when he became the Thomas Cantor in 1723. The position as the music director of the famous St. Thomas Boys Choir is extremely busy and challenging, especially during Bach's time. In addition to providing music for the 4 Lutheran churches in the city, Bach was responsible to teach general subjects and music at the St. Thomas School. The St. Thomas School is one of the oldest schools in the world. It was founded along with the St. Thomas Church in the early 13th century. Bach used to teach here for almost 30 years as part of his duty as the Thomas Cantor in Leipzig. The St. Thomas School was founded more than 800 years ago in the year 1212. The original location of the St. Thomas School was right next to the St. Thomas Church, but in the 1870s, the school moved to this building, which is about 15 minutes walking distance from the St. Thomas Church. The St. Thomas School's Boys Choirs is one of the most famous choirs in the world today. We are only minutes away from their daily rehearsal. Join me as we observe their preparation for the upcoming performance. So here we have a new building that was not here during Bach's time, next to the St. Thomas Church.
Built in 1904.
This is the exact location where the St. Thomas School used to be.
Yes. It doesn't exist anymore because the church wanted to have a new building in early 20th century, so they demolished the old one. But the good thing, David, is we have the chance to at least get an impression how the St. Thomas School, including Bach's apartment, looks like. Here we have a model of the St. Thomas School, which was originally built in 16th century. In the beginning it was only a building of 3 floors, and then later they added more floors. We not only had the school for the 54 boarders and all the other students, all in all about 200 students.
So we see that Bach's apartment is down here,
Yeah.
and then up here we see many beds, so this belongs to the students.
Look, Bach's composing study,
Right.
the place where he created all this amazing music, was with a window into this direction, So he was looking straight to the river Pleiße, very charming, and some parks behind it. So that's what Bach saw when he composed St. Matthew Passion or pieces like this. But on the other hand, it must have been extremely noisy.
The St. Thomas Church in Leipzig was built in the 12th century. It is a significant historical venue for many reasons. Martin Luther preached here in 1539 and introduced the Reformation to Leipzig. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart played the organ here in 1789. The opera composer Richard Wagner was baptized here in 1813, and Felix Mendelssohn conducted the Leipzig's revival of St. Matthew Passion here in 1841. But above all, the St. Thomas Church is the primary venue for all pilgrimages of Johann Sebastian Bach, as he served here as the Thomas Cantor for almost 30 years, starting in 1723. In the last 27 years of his life, Johann Sebastian Bach spent much of his time composing and performing here at the St. Thomas Church. Many important works such as the St. Matthew Passion, Magnificat, as well as numerous cantatas were first conceived, composed, and performed at this church. For many years, the St. Thomas Church served not only the center of worship, but also the center of music for the city of Leipzig.
And second half of his life he spent here in Leipzig, and I mean, this is the place where Bach almost every day of his Leipzig life spent and worked, performed. But here in St. Thomas Church, I mean, that's the place next to his apartment where the name of the choir came from, and the choir still exists. Today, many churches we used to perform the music down in the church, so close to the altar. But during Bach's time, it was quite common that the performances took place up at the choir loft.
So it's kind of like sounding like the sound coming from heaven.
From heaven, that's it.
Angels.
Yeah, it's the sound of the angels. And people have to look into the other direction, to the cross, to Jesus, and just enjoying the sound, not seeing what's going on up on the choir loft.
What the organ was like when Bach was here, so obviously it's not one of these two organs. None of these were here.
We know what organs he had in this church, but we don't know how the organs look. We have not a painting or a drawing of the organ, just a description in words. It was at the gallery, and we know it was not so big, some 30 stops, but very old. In Bach's time it was 150 years old. This organ here, we call it Bach Organ. It's built in 2000 by Gerald Wöhl in Baroque style, and it looks not so big, but it is big. It is 60-stop organ. The big Baroque organ in Naumburg has 54 stops. This has 60 stops. And the other organ at the West Gallery, it's built by Wilhelm Sauer in 1889 with pneumatic action. Romantic instrument for romantic music, Reger, César Franck, Reinberger, Liszt.
I like very much in this description how Bach is described as a conductor of church music, feeling the rhythm in any of his bones, moving the head, the finger, stomping the feet, helping everybody with his voice. They had to find a way to come through with the entire piece in the service. And it makes sense to have a guy like him being everywhere, taking care for everything and making sure that they will start and end at the same time.
So we know that in addition to the St. Thomas Church, and Bach also had to provide music for 3 other churches, and the second church would be the St. Nicholas Church, which is where we are now.
Yes, you're right. And actually, Bach was in charge for the church music in the 4 Leipzig churches, but his own work was mainly concentrated on the 2 main churches, which was St. Thomas, so at the western end of the city, and St. Nicholas at the eastern end. And the one Sunday he performed his cantata with the best 16 boys of the St. Thomas choir in St. Nicholas Church, other Sunday at St. Thomas.
So they rotate.
They rotated. So and actually 50% of Bach's Leipzig pieces were actually premiered in St. Nicholas Church, and the most important ones or the most famous ones are first cantata of Christmas Oratorio, which was Christmas Day 1734. So the famous Jauchzefrohlocket was played for the very first time here in this church. And St. John Passion in 1724. This church is completely different from St. Thomas.
Right.
So the colors are white, and then you have these palms. They did a big renovation in the 1780s, so the walls are still the same, but all the interior, the architecture inside is from late 18th century. So in other words, Bach never saw St. Nicholas Church in such a condition. But the space is still the same. So that's the largest organ in entire Saxony.
Wow.
Built in 19th century and was renovated very recently. It wouldn't work to perform a piece like St. John Passion or Bach Cantata up at the choir loft. There's not enough space. And this is something which already was the problem during Bach's time. But the choir loft during Bach's time was not in the middle of the church. It was slightly on the left side, and the organ itself was actually completely in the left corner of the church.
Okay, so it's coming from one side of the church instead of in the St. Thomas Church where it was coming from the center.
Yeah. It's not by accident that Bach wanted to have his premiere performance of St. John Passion in St. Thomas Church. That's how he announced the performance. Right. And then the Leipzig Town Council said, no, we have rules, and that means alternating system. 1 year the Passion music, Good Friday at St. Thomas, out of
the next year will be
St. Nicholas. In 1724, it was for St. Nicholas. But he definitely preferred St. Thomas for the large-scale works. And it's not by accident that a piece like St. Matthew Passion, where you need much more singers, the two orchestras and the two choirs, was obviously always performed in St. Thomas.
I can't think of another example of this thin line between, being really in the scenery and also trying to be outside the choirs. The choruses, they are right in the scenery.
if they have the chorus, but the chorals are reflecting on it, or are feeling with
The believers.
Yes, and then you have the reflection in the areas, and the evangelist right in the middle. I find that really perfect.
Around the time when Bach was here, it was the center of commercial, center of trading, center of fashion, and center of everything, basically.
Yeah, some people met at the coffee houses, not only listened to music there, but were trading, were gambling, there also was prostitution, there was everything.
So we know Bach loves coffee a lot.
Yes, he composed the coffee cantata.
Yes, it was performed in a coffee house.
In a coffee house, not in this coffee house, but in the Zimmermann's coffee house.
So this is the location where the Zimmermann Cafe House used to be.
Yes, this is exactly the place where the building was standing and where Bach from 1729 until the early 1740s performed regularly every week with the Collegium Musicum, so with an orchestra of students from the university.
And it's just a few steps from the Outer Rathaus, which is the city center.
Yes, it's absolutely close, and from here it's maybe 5 minutes to the Thomasschule where Bach lived.
And I know that Collegium Musicum was founded by Telemann in 1701,
Yes,
who, by the way, was
absolutely
also competitors of Bach when they were applying for the job for Thomas Cantor.
The Collegium Musicum was founded by Telemann in 1701, and it was closely connected to the music directorship of the Neue Kirche. So Telemann was a music director at the Neue Kirche, and his successors were also director of the Collegium Musicum, and this rule changed in 1729. Then Bach took over the directorship at a time when his focus shifted away from composing cantatas, new cantatas every week, and when he was looking for new musical challenges.
The instruments during Bach's time are quite different from the orchestral instruments as we know them today. The modern flute, for example, is made of metal, but the Baroque flute, along with the Baroque oboe and bassoon, are made entirely of wood. The natural trumpet is the most commonly used brass instrument in Bach's compositions. The natural trumpet does not have valves, and therefore, even though the length of its tube is twice as long as the modern trumpet, it is only able to play the note of the harmonic series, which usually lingers on the higher register and is extremely challenging to play. As for the Baroque strings instruments, gut strings are used instead of the metal strings, and the bows are much shorter than the modern ones. In addition, chin rest and shoulder rest were only invented in the 19th and 20th century. Therefore, not only do Baroque instruments look and sound differently from the modern ones, but their playing techniques and styles are also quite distinguishable. I heard that some wind instruments were only famous during Bach's time and for Bach's work, and you don't see them very much in other compositions. Is that right?
That's right, and maybe the most famous one is the oboe da caccia.
Yeah.
So the oboe built for the hand. Yeah. So and it has a very, very special wooden sound. You know that Bach used it very often in his passions and his cantatas. Some scholars argued that Bach himself actually invented the instrument.
Right.
I'm not quite sure about this.
Have we seen any of this instrumentation, for this particular instruments in other composers' works?
Yeah, there are evidences that other composers, contemporary composers, used it. A Leipzig oboe builder, Johannes Eichentopf, invented the instrument in the early 1720s. The sound of an original oboe da caccia is very special.
In the middle of the 19th century, there was a surge of interest in early music. Instead of only performing music by living composers, musicians often include music from the past into their concert programs. Among the pioneers of the early music revival, Robert and Clara Schumann, and particularly Felix Mendelssohn, were very fond of Bach's music. They were among the first to bring Bach's works into the concert halls and started Bach revival, which lasts through this day. Although Mendelssohn only lived here in Leipzig for several years, he was the music director of the Gewandhaus Orchestra. In addition, along with Clara and Robert Schumann, they were studying and performing Bach's music, trying to reintroduce Bach's music to a wider audience. Behind me here, this is the apartment where Felix Mendelssohn used to live right before his death. Mendelssohn moved to Leipzig in 1835 and became the music director of the Gewandhaus Orchestra. At the same time, he also had regular engagements with the Opera House, the St. Thomas Boys Choir, and other music institutions in the city. In addition to his conducting and composing duties, he also performed frequently as a soloist in various concerts around Europe. This was Mendelssohn's third and last apartment in Leipzig, where he lived for 2 years from 1845 until his death in 1847.
In the 19th century, Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy lived here in this house, and this room, this size of rooms, was common to play chamber music in this time. The Quatuor Opus 80 from Mendelssohn was composed at the studies room at the end of the hall, and then the first performance was here in this room. Johann Sebastian Bach was here in Leipzig for 27 years. Yeah. After his death in 1750, he was forgotten. It was the same like Handel or Gluck or other from this time. Again, it was common to play contemporary composers. And Mendelssohn done the first public performance of St. Matthew Passion in 1829 in Berlin.
With the Berlin Sing Academy?
With the Berlin Sing Academy. Right. Mendelssohn in the age of 20.
When Mendelssohn was 16 years old, his grandmother Bella Solomon gave him a manuscript copy of Bach's masterpiece, St. Matthew Passion. 4 years later, in 1829, with the support of his music teacher Friedrich Zelter, the 20-year-old Mendelssohn conducted the revival performance of The Passion in Berlin and started the ever-growing Bach revival, which continues through this day. While Mendelssohn was in Leipzig, he and his sister Fanny Mendelssohn, along with their friends Robert and Clara Schumann, have organized and performed in many salon concerts at his apartment. Musician and historian Christian Schmidt will be showing us around the Mendelssohn House, starting with the music salon.
Such famous people like Robert Schumann, his wife Clara Wieck, Richard Wagner was as guest here, Louis Spohr and many others, publishers from Leipzig. Jenny Lind, Mendelssohn's favorite soprano singer, yes. She sang many of Mendelssohn's Lieder here in this music salon. And so they installed, we say, abendliche musikalische Unterhaltungen or the Sunday concerts at 10:30. So they met here for music and to talk to each other, to discuss latest fashion.
So we know that there's a strong connection between the Schumanns, the Mendelssohn, to Johann Sebastian Bach. So do you think that Bach music would have played in this room during Mendelssohn's lifetime?
So when the friend circle met here for music, of course they played not only contemporary music, but also music by Johann Sebastian Bach, because Mendelssohn loved that music so much, and he wanted to give all his friends that wonderful pleasure to hear this music. Here we are in Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy's study. In this small room he created so great music, like his second oratorio Elijah, or his second piano trio Opus 66, or that wonderful string quartet in F minor. The watercolors are by Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy. He drew sketches and painted watercolors wherever he was. He was not known as a painter. It was his hobby, you can say.
But this is by no means an amateur work.
You're right. Today we have our mobile phones and take photos. He drew sketches and painted those watercolors.
Not only Felix Mendelssohn and his sister Fanny shared their loves for Bach through exchanging of letters. Robert and Clara Schumann also had similar exchange on studying Bach's music in their marriage diary. Behind me is the Schumann House. It is the place where Robert and Clara Schumann have lived in the 1840s. Both of them were huge fans of Johann Sebastian Bach.
So this room that we're standing in was the room where a lot of family and friends would gather, and the Schumanns kind of became this like magnet for anyone who was interested in the newest music currents going on. They would come here, they would play pieces either that they composed, like Mendelssohn would come here very often and play his music, or they would talk about different music. They would also play Bach. So Clara Wieck, even as a girl before she was married, her father had her play fugues by Bach, and studying them, she studied counterpoint with the Thomas Cantor at the time.
So they have a connection with the St. Thomas Church too?
Yes, definitely they do. And then when she got to know Robert Schumann, she got to know somebody who was also already a Bach lover, somebody who really wanted to also educate the audiences what Bach's music is about. They moved in here to this apartment after fighting for several years just to get permission to marry, and during the second week they decided to systematically study the Well-Tempered Klavier by Bach. This is the marriage diary in German, the Ehetagebücher, which is now published. I don't know what the couple would have thought about that, but in any case for us it's very fascinating, because the first 4 years that they were married, that they lived here in Leipzig together, they would take turns every week and write about what happened in their time here. And they write here on the 21st of September, 1840. This is the second week of their marriage. This is Clara Schumann writing. So far I haven't been really industrious, but today I arose with the best intentions. We have started with the fugues of Bach. Robert marks those places where the theme always returns. Studying these fugues is really quite interesting and gives me more pleasure each day. Robert reprimanded me very strongly. I had doubled one place in octaves and thus impermissibly added a fifth voice to the four-voice texture. he was right to denounce this, but it pained me not to have sensed it myself. So they were studying it together, and 5 years later they also studied Bach again, and Robert Schumann composed his Opus 60, the fugues on the name Bach, B-A-C-H. Yeah. So that was kind of a product of their study together.
Oh, romantic.
Yeah. And then they continued this conversation outward by interacting with people like Mendelssohn, who was, of course, at the same time really trying to get Bach into the concert halls in the Gewandhaus here in Leipzig, and so that was an influential part of getting Bach's music heard. Robert Schumann writing in his New Journal for Music about Bach's works, publishing some unpublished works in his journal, and getting the word out. And then on the performing side, Clara, Schumann, and Mendelssohn, who were performing it for audiences to hear and appreciate. For the first time, a huge amount of people heard Bach's music.
Bach was buried in 1750 in the cemetery outside of the church, but later in early 20th century, because Bach became more and more famous.
Right.
They wanted to have him back here in the church. Now, it's always covered with flowers from people all over the world. Once I saw letters here written from a guy from Pakistan, actually, saying, "Thank you so much, J.S. Bach. I did this pilgrimage here to your grave just to say thank you for your music." That's the place he belongs and where any Bach pilgrimage ends.
We have here a Bible of the Leipzig Town Council, a wonderful book, gilded with ornaments. And this book, this Bible has been used if somebody applied for a new job or got his new job. He had to confirm, he had to take his hand there and say, "I swear by God and by my religion that I will fulfill my duties." So we could have the J.S. Bach DNA here also on this book. Despite all problems and all things, he was a strong Lutheran.
Yeah.
He was a strong believer. He was an expert of the Bible, because we know it from some handwritten editions in the Karloff Bible, who's now stored in the US. But we also know it from his music that he was a keen studier of the gospel. He did very well know what was inside, and I think he had, despite all his problems, he had right up to the end a strong belief, and he died as a faithful Christian. So this Bible was not his own one, but it was maybe the most important book in his life and the most important source of his creative inspiration. More important than all musical inspirations in the end was the Bible, was the gospel.
From his composition, we know that he's not only an accomplished musician, but also a theologian.
Yeah, of course. And
I mean, he's making biblical references everywhere in his composition.
You can enjoy his music also if you have no idea of these things because of the sheer quality. But if you get a little bit insight in these things, you get much more joy, you get much deeper. Robert Schumann in the 19th century says, "You will never be finished with Bach." There is no discussion among musicians about Bach's quality. Some prefer Haydn, some prefer Mozart, some say Wagner isn't a musician at all, but in Bach everybody believes in Bach.
And I guess that when someone says that they do not like Bach, it reflects more of who they are than who Bach really is.
Sometimes I write a booklet or I do some professional things on Bach's music, and I start to cry in some moments that this music is so touching. It's unbelievable what he does in that moment.
Yeah, and then knowing all the background, how these pieces were created, Bach constantly was under time pressure when creating all these cantatas, so week by week, even the Passion. So he always maintained this highest level of composing, no matter if he was composing for St. Thomas Boys, for some virtuoso players.
He was an unbreakable artist. Other persons would have changed their style or would have made compromises or would have given up music entirely or whatever. But he was unbreakable, and he was believing right to the end that he will succeed, maybe not in his life, but later on.
And ultimately, Bach, as a musician, as a person, as a believer, he's the same person. Very vulnerable, very transparent. Therefore, his music speaks directly to us.